The storm over Heartland wasn't just in the sky, was inside the ranch itself. Everyone could feel it, a quiet pressure, an unseen weight, as if something big was coming straight at them. And the strange part, it all pointed back to one name people whispered in frustration and fear: Nathan. His plans were no longer rumors, they were becoming real, and Heartland had no idea how close they were to losing everything they'd worked for. The day began like any other, but the air felt heavier than usual. Amy walked across the yard, noticing the small things that didn't add up: empty feed buckets that should have been full, training logs left unfinished, and a few horses acting unsettled as if they sensed something the humans couldn't. Even Spartan lifted his head in a nervous way, ears flicking toward the distant fields where the wind carried unfamiliar sounds. Amy tried to shake the feeling off, but it clung to her like dust after a long ride. Jack watched her from the porch, his eyes narrow, reading her the way only he could. She didn't say a word, yet he could tell something inside her was twisting. Heartland was her home, her legacy, and lately it felt like it was slipping sideways despite all her effort. It wasn't just the workload. It wasn't just the money shortages everyone tried not to talk about. No, this was deeper, more targeted, and every sign pointed to someone pulling strings. Nathan. It had started small, a supplier suddenly backing out of a deal, a contractor refusing a job last minute with a weak excuse, a client choosing a different therapy program after a better offer. At first, Amy thought it was bad luck or simple business competition, but as the weeks passed, the pattern sharpened like a knife. Nathan was moving closer, step by step, as if trying to corner Heartland into a place where they couldn't stand on their own. Logan noticed it too. He found Amy staring at a set of training schedules that had been completely disrupted. He tried to joke something about the universe, giving them a challenge, but his smile faded when he saw how tired her eyes were. She didn't want to scare him, but she couldn't hide the truth anymore. Something's wrong, she whispered, almost as if she didn't want the wind to hear. Logan didn't push for details. He just nodded, standing beside her in the quiet, offering the only support he could at that moment. And then there was Lindy, who had overheard enough adult conversations to know that something bad was coming. She clung to Spartan during her ride, holding him a little tighter than usual. Even she sensed the shift inside the ranch, the uncertainty, the tension, the worry that floated in every corner. She asked Amy if everything was okay. Amy forced a smile, but her voice wavered enough for Lindy to look at her longer than a child normally would. Heartland felt different. The barn seemed darker, the fields felt colder. The usual comfort of the ranch had thinned into something fragile. Jack tried to keep spirits high, reminding everyone that they had survived storms before, real ones and emotional ones, but even he felt the ground trembling beneath them. Something was pushing against the ranch from the outside, and the pressure was growing. Later that afternoon, Amy received a phone call that made her heart drop. A longtime client, someone who trusted Heartland for years, was canceling without giving a clear reason. The silence on the other end told her everything she needed to know. They weren't leaving because they wanted to. They were leaving because someone else had convinced them. Someone with power. Someone with influence. Nathan's influence. Amy stood in the middle of the yard, gripping her phone so tightly her hands shook. The ranch she fought every day to protect was slowly being chipped away from the shadows. And worst of all, she didn't know how far Nathan was willing to go or how fast he was moving, but she could feel it. A storm was coming, and Heartland wasn't ready. Rumors travel fast in small towns, but this time it felt different, quieter, heavier, like people were afraid to speak too loudly about what they'd heard. Amy didn't have the full picture yet, but the pieces she did have painted a threat, bigger than she expected. And it all became clearer the moment Jack walked into the kitchen, holding a folded newspaper with a look that confirmed her worst fears. Without a word, he placed it on the table. The headline wasn't loud or flashy, but its message dug straight into the heart of the ranch. A new state-of-the-art equine therapy center was being built on the outskirts of Hudson. The owner's name wasn't printed, but the description matched Nathan too perfectly for it to be anyone else. The exact methods he used to sabotage Heartland were now starting to make sense. Every cancelled deal, every sudden shortage, every unexpected problem, wasn't random. He was clearing the path for his own rise. Amy stared at the article, feeling her chest tighten. Nathan wasn't just starting a competing operation. He was building something designed to replace Heartland. He wanted to be the new standard, the new trusted name, the one clients turned to when they needed help. And the worst part was that he knew exactly how Heartland worked, its strengths, its weaknesses, its vulnerabilities. He wasn't just aiming to succeed, he was aiming to take Heartland down in the process. Later that day, Logan came rushing into the barn with news that hit even harder. A large group of horses from a nearby training facility had been moved unexpectedly. Their owner claimed they were going to a more advanced program, the very same phrase Nathan had been using in his recent meetings. That was when everything connected. Nathan had already secured the trust of major investors and was taking clients even before his center opened. He was spreading the idea that Heartland was getting old, outdated, too small for modern therapy, and people were believing him. Amy tried to stay calm, but inside she felt the ground shifting. This wasn't a simple rivalry anymore. Nathan was playing a calculated game. He wasn't just moving faster, he was playing dirtier. He had access to resources Heartland didn't. He had a polished presentation, flashy promises, and the confidence of someone who had nothing to lose. But Amy had something he didn't: the history of Heartland, the love built into its walls, and the trust of people who believed in second chances. Still, love wasn't enough to fight someone who knew how to manipulate the system. As evening settled in, Amy sat near Spartan's stall, letting the warmth of his presence calm her. Horses had a way of grounding her when everything else spun out of control. Spartan nudged her gently, sensing the tension she carried. She whispered to him that she wouldn't let Heartland fall, not now, not ever. But the truth was, she didn't know how to fight someone who seemed to always be one step ahead. Meanwhile, Nathan continued pulling strings from behind the scenes. He met with wealthy partners, presenting them with glossy designs, futuristic equipment, and promises of rapid results. He talked about Heartland as if it were fading away, a relic of the past that couldn't keep up with the modern world. He didn't say Amy's name out loud, but the message was clear. He wanted to rise by making her fall, and he was closer than Heartland realized. By the end of the day, Amy received another message. A supplier who had worked with the ranch for years suddenly announced they wouldn't continue their contract. No explanation, no apology, just a formal notification. It was almost too perfectly timed, too carefully delivered to be random. That was when Amy's frustration finally cracked into a deeper fear. Nathan wasn't just planning his future, he was erasing theirs. Amy walked out into the yard, staring at the fading sunlight. The ranch looked peaceful on the outside, but inside her mind, alarms were blaring. If she didn't act soon, Nathan's plan would swallow them whole. She didn't know how to stop him yet, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty: he was coming for Heartland. And this was only the beginning. The next morning came with a strange silence hanging over Heartland. A silence that didn't feel peaceful but rather like the world was holding its breath. Amy woke up tired, not because she hadn't slept, but because her mind had been running in circles all night. She felt the weight of every missing supply order, every cancelled client, every whisper of Nathan's rising influence. It was like someone had taken Heartland and placed it on thin ice. One wrong move, and everything would crack beneath them. But what Amy didn't know was that the truth she'd been searching for was about to find her instead. It started when Logan approached her with a hesitant look, holding a folder he found left near the old shed. It didn't belong to anyone from Heartland. When Amy opened it, her breath caught. Inside were copies of documents, meeting notes, investor lists, and strategic outlines, all stamped with a familiar logo. Nathan's new project. But what shook her the most wasn't the project itself. It was how detailed these notes were about Heartland. Weak spots, financial gaps, current struggles, even a list of clients who were likely to leave in the coming months. Nathan had been studying Heartland like a hunter studies its prey. Every paper felt like a trap he had set and was waiting for the perfect moment to snap shut. Amy felt anger rise in her chest, but fear followed right behind it. This wasn't just betrayal or competition. This was an attack planned, structured, and executed with precision. Nathan had mapped out ways to drain them slowly until the ranch collapsed under its own stress. And the scariest part, he was succeeding. Later that afternoon, Amy took the folder to Jack, and his reaction said everything. His jaw tightened, his eyes hardened, and the calm voice he usually carried disappeared. "He's been preparing this for a long time," Jack said. "He's not just building something new, he's tearing something down." But there was still more Amy needed to understand. That evening, she drove into town, following a quiet suspicion that kept tugging at her. She stopped by the cafe where people usually chatted about small-town matters. But today, every conversation paused when she walked in. She could feel the shift in the air, sympathy mixed with unease. A few people whispered, and one turned away before she could catch their eye. It was like they already knew something she didn't. Then the truth dropped. A local stable owner finally approached Amy, guilt in his eyes. He confessed that Nathan had been visiting businesses around Hudson, offering special deals if they cut ties with Heartland. Bigger payments, faster results, promises of more clients. And for those who hesitated, Nathan had hinted that supporting Heartland might become financially difficult in the near future, not a threat spoken outright, but clear enough for anyone to understand. Amy felt her heart twist. Nathan wasn't convincing people with honesty, he was cornering them with fear. When she left the cafe, she walked back to her truck slowly, feeling the world around her blur. Heartland wasn't losing support because it was weak. It was losing support because Nathan made people afraid to stand with them. He had planted doubts everywhere quietly, strategically, until Heartland stood on shaky ground. Driving home, Amy realized something else. Nathan wasn't working alone. Someone was feeding him inside information. He knew too much things only someone close to Heartland would know. The thought made her chest tighten. Who could betray them like that? A worker? A former client? Someone pretending to help? Every possibility felt like a shadow creeping behind her when she pulled into the ranch. The sky had turned dark, and the air felt colder than usual. Amy stepped out of her truck, looking at the barns, the fields, the familiar lights of home. She had discovered the truth, but now that she knew it, the danger felt even more real. Nathan had laid out every step of the plan. He had pushed Heartland to the edge. And now, Amy understood something she hadn't before. If she didn't fight back soon, Nathan wouldn't just win. He would destroy everything Heartland had ever stood for. Night settled over Heartland with a thick blanket of cold air. The kind that seeped into the bones and stayed there. But the cold wasn't what kept Amy awake. It was the truth. She had uncovered Athen's plan. The betrayal in the shadows. The silent fear spreading through Hudson. Heartland had been pushed into a corner, and for the first time in years, Amy felt like she didn't know how to climb out of it. She sat alone in the barn, the soft sound of horses breathing around her, and tried to steady her thoughts. Spartan nudged her shoulder, almost as if urging her to stay strong. But the weight of everything felt heavier than ever. Still, something inside her refused to break. Heartland had survived fires, storms, loss, and heartbreak. She couldn't let one man erase everything generations had built. She couldn't let Nathan turn the world against them through lies and manipulation. Not while she still had breath in her lungs. A spark lit inside her, a small one, fragile, but real. It was the spark of determination. The same one her mother once carried. The same one that made Heartland more than just a ranch. It made it a home worth fighting for. She walked out into the open yard, letting the cold wind clear her thoughts. Jack was standing near the porch, and the moment he saw her, he knew she had reached a turning point. He didn't ask what her next move was. He didn't need to. He simply nodded, like someone who had seen this fire in Amy before. Heartland doesn't give up, he said quietly. Amy felt something settle inside her, a steadying force. She wasn't just reacting anymore. She was preparing. The next morning, she called a meeting in the living room. Logan sat with his arms crossed, trying to hide his worry. Lisa joined.com, but clearly shaken by the news. Even Lindy sat close to Amy, sensing that something big was happening. Amy placed the folder from Nathan's project on the table. The room went still. No one spoke for several moments. It was like they were staring at a map of all the ways their world had been attacked. Logan was the first to break the silence. So what do we do now? His voice carried both fear and hope. Amy took a deep breath. She wasn't the unsure woman from the night before. She felt different, now stronger, clearer, focused. We fight back, she said, and the room shifted. Shoulders straightened, eyes sharpened. Heartland wasn't defeated yet. Amy laid out a plan, not a perfect one, not a guaranteed one, but the beginning of something. They needed to face Nathan head, not with anger, but with truth. They needed to protect their clients, rebuild relationships, and expose the tactics Nathan had used to undermine them. They needed to remind the people of Hudson why Heartland had survived for generations, because it stood for honesty, compassion, and second chances. Jack agreed to speak to old partners who still trusted the Fleming Bartlett name. Lisa offered to reach out to contacts who valued fairness over flashy deals. Logan insisted on helping Amy gather proof of Nathan's manipulation, determined to show that Heartland wouldn't back down. Lindy hugged Amy tightly, whispering, "We can do it." And those small words carried more power than anything else. But Amy knew the hardest part was still ahead. To stop Nathan, she had to confront him directly. She had to look him in the eye and make him understand that Heartland wouldn't crumble just because he wanted it to. That thought scared her. Nathan wasn't the type to back down easily. He would push, twist, and manipulate until he got what he wanted. But Amy wasn't the same girl he had once underestimated. She had grown stronger through every challenge life threw at her. Later in the evening, Amy stood outside the barn, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of fire. It felt symbolic, like a warning and a promise, all at once. She knew Nathan would strike again. He wouldn't stop until Heartland was gone. But now, she wasn't waiting for his next move. She was preparing her own. Heartland was not just land and barns and fences. It was family. It was legacy. It was everything Amy had fought for since she was a teenager. Nathan had pushed them to the edge, but instead of falling, they were rising. The decision was made. Amy was done being hunted in the dark. Now she was stepping into the light, ready to fight for everything Heartland stood for.